sort of down under here to Australia. Rabbi Goldman has been one of the premier Rabbonim in Johannesburg in South Africa for many decades, but also has been the rabbi's rabbi and has been an inspiration to so many of us over the years through his drashas, through his inspiration, and through the way that he interacts with his balabatim and with the community. And it's a great honor and kavod that we are able to welcome Rabbi Goldman, Rabbi Yossy Goldman, to share with us words of inspiration and a shir here tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi Feldman. Thank you, Rabbi Krebs. It's wonderful to be with you. We're still in the morning in South Africa, but good evening, good moed, moadim l'simcha to all of you in Oz. And thank you, Rabbi Krebs, for the invitation, for your lovely imaginative program from around the world. Very impressed. And thank you, Rabbi Marty Feldman, for your very kind words. So I don't know if you saw that cartoon of the couple who were anticipating that lockdown is going to end any day now, but they had a problem. They'd put on so much weight in the lockdown they couldn't get out the front door. You know, this is becoming a serious issue. But we'll talk about the freedom of expression during lockdown just now. It's nice to reconnect to so many old friends I see on the list, and looking to make new friends all the time. So thank you for joining us. We advertised that I would be talking about my favorite Pesach theme and or themes. Well, I've chosen one theme, and not surprisingly, it's the theme of freedom itself. You know, when I was growing up in America, there was a cigarette that was being advertised as a menthol cigarette that was less nicotine, it was less unhealthy. I don't think any cigarettes are healthy, but less unhealthy perhaps. It was called Salem cigarettes. And they had a little jingle. And I remember the jingle. They said, "You can take Salem out of the country, but you can't take the country out of Salem." So I know that there are people who argue that you can take the Jew out of Egypt, but you can't necessarily take the Egypt out of the Jew. In other words, from that experience, Jews came out retaining a slave mentality, the mindset of a slave. But the saintly and brilliant Maharal of Prague, the 16th century sage, mystic, philosopher, chief rabbi of Prague, there's even a statue of the Maharal of Prague outside the city hall in Prague today. Did I say plague? Prague. The Maharal of Prague. We have enough plagues. The Maharal disagreed with the notion that Jews inherited that slave mentality from Egypt. In fact, he argued it's the very opposite. The Maharal writes that since the Exodus, every Jew is innately free. The Exodus freed us not only physically, not only politically, but spiritually and psychologically. We are innately free. And Pesach is not just a once-off historical event, the dramatic story of a people liberated. Pesach is the story of the Jew forever. We are a free people. It's a spiritual revolution which changed the mindset, the psyche, and the very nature of a Jew. We are an innately free people, physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. We are free forever. And no one and nothing can change that. So in 1927, back in Russia, the communists were trying to close down Judaism and make everybody atheists, close down shuls, close down Jewish schools, close down mikvahs. And there was a leading rabbi who fought them tooth and nail, to the death, literally. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, of blessed memory, the 6th Chabad Rebbe, was the acknowledged spiritual leader of Russian Jewry at that time. And he defied the communists. And he nearly paid with his life. He was arrested. He was sentenced to death for spreading Yiddishkeit in communist Russia in 1927. Miraculously, international political pressure brought to bear convinced the communists to commute his death sentence to 10 years of exile. And there he was on the train getting ready to go into a life of exile in some distant remote village called Kostroma. And thousands of Russian Jews flooded the train station, the platform of the train where the Rebbe was, to wish him well, to express their solidarity with him. And the Rebbe came onto the platform and spoke to those Jews in a loud, stirring, courageous voice, knowing full well that the KGB was there in full force. And he said immortal words. In Yiddish, I'll translate. He said, the neshama geht nit in golus. The soul, the neshama of a Jew, the soul cannot go into exile. They can imprison my body, but they can never imprison my soul. Indeed, he would outlast the communists, and he was freed completely not long thereafter, went to Riga and Poland, eventually in 1940 came to America and laid the seeds and the foundations for the Jewish revolution and the Yiddishkeit in America that we see. Dr. Viktor Frankl, the famous author of Man's Search for Meaning, said it in his own way. He not only spoke about that meaning and purpose in life gave people a better chance of survival in the Nazi death camps, that was his main theme of his book, but he also spoke about freedom in particular. And he said, our greatest freedom is the freedom to choose our attitude to any given situation. There are always choices to make, said Viktor Frankl. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to us in the camps to make a decision. Would you submit to those powers which threaten to rob you of your very self, of your inner freedom, which determined whether you would become the plaything of circumstance, renouncing your freedom and dignity, or would you resist? And that brings me to Pesach 1943, the very last Pesach Seder in the Warsaw Ghetto, where brave Jewish fighters were attacking the mighty Nazi war machine from the roofs of the Warsaw Ghetto, while down below in the cellars, a Seder was taking place. They managed to bake matzah in the Warsaw Ghetto. They put a white tablecloth on the table. They lit yontif candles, the ladies. They had matzah. They didn't have mora. They didn't need mora. There was enough bitterness in their lives at that time. Can you imagine a little boy saying the Manishtana at that Seder in the Warsaw Ghetto? Why is this night different from all other nights? How different is this darkness from all other darknesses? Some of those Jews at that Seder in the Warsaw Ghetto survived, made it out of Europe, America, Israel, and told the story. Most, tragically, did not. But the faith, the defiance, the freedom to celebrate a Seder, that Pesach in the Warsaw Ghetto, is mind-boggling, is absolutely inspirational. Or how about the handful of faithful Jews who risked their lives to bake matzah inside Nazi death camps and got away with it? Among them, the saintly Klosenberger Rebbe of blessed memory, and a Jew, an ordinary Jew named Yankel Friedman, Olav Shalom, who I actually knew growing up in New York. That sense of freedom, come what may, stripped of everything, including their dignity, they chose to remain free and faithful despite the torture, despite the terror, and they lived to tell the tale. And they rebuilt their families. The Klosenberger Rebbe lost his wife and 11 children in the Holocaust. But he rebuilt his family, he rebuilt his community, and eventually he went from America to Israel, and he's responsible for the building of the Lanyado Hospital in Netanya, which is operational to this day. I'm sure it's very busy today. So every Jew, says the Maharal of Prague, has that innate freedom. But how do we uncover it? How do we get in touch with our deepest spiritual core identity that has that freedom? So for that, I'd like to look into a famous line in Pirkei Avot, in the classic Ethics of the Fathers, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. In chapter 6, there's a line in Pirkei Avot that says, Ein lecha ben chorin elo misha osik b'talmud Torah. There is no free man except one who occupies himself with the study of the Torah. Torah makes us free. That's there, chapter and verse. Chapter 6, Ethics of the Fathers. Torah makes us free. And you might say, really? Torah makes us free? Isn't the Torah full of rules and regulations, restrictions and limitations? Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, or else. This is not kosher, this is forbidden. You want to tell me Torah with all its laws makes you free? So let me do what the Jews like to do. We answer one question with another question, right? They once asked Goldman Meir, why do Jews answer one question with another question? She says, why not? So the other question is this. Why is this teaching of Pirkei Avot framed and phrased in the negative? Ein lecha ben chorin elo misha osik. There is no free man except he who occupies himself with Torah. It should have said it in a positive way. Like in chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, we have those famous lines that you're all familiar with. Ezehu Gibor, who is a strong person, Hakovesh es Yisrael, one who conquers his passion. Ezehu Ashir, who is wealthy, who is rich. Asamer Bechelka, he was content with his lot. He should have said here too. Ezehu ben Chorin, who is a free person. Oisik b'Torah, one who occupies himself with Torah. Why is it said in the negative? Ein lecha ben Chorin. There is no free person except he who occupies himself with Torah. So I want to share with you an answer to this question, a brilliant answer to this question, taught by my own saintly mentor and teacher, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory. And in his commentary on Pirkei Avot, you can find this idea. Rebbe says, if you think about it, actually no one in this world is really free. No one is free. No matter where you are in the ladder of life, no one is really free. Completely independent of outside circumstances, issues, people. Take somebody who doesn't have a job. He's never unemployed. He's thinking to himself, if only I could get a job, I'd be free. I could live my life, feed my family, be a mensch. Okay, Baruch Hashem. He gets a job. Now he's still on the low level, low rung in the corporate hierarchy. He said, oh, if I could get a better job, if I can get a raise, a higher position, better salary, oh, then I'd be free. So thank God he gets it. Then he sees, oh, you know, there's the MD. Man, he's really free. If I could become the MD, then I'd really be free. So he works very hard, and guess what? He becomes the MD. Then he discovers there's a CEO on top of him. Oh, if I could be the CEO, then I'd really be free. Becomes the CEO. Then he finds out there's a chairman and a board of directors on top of the CEO, and they drive him crazy. And they're on his case day and night. So he decides, you know what? I'll become the chairman of the board. And you know what? He became the chairman of the board. Then he discovers that the board of directors are not such pushovers. So he says, you know what? That's it. I'm finished with the corporate world. I'm going to buy my own business. I will be the sole owner of this business. I'll be absolutely free to do as I please. So he gets his own business and he runs the show single-handedly. You know what he discovers? There's competitors. There's difficult customers. There are unions. And it's not so easy. So at the end of the day, says the Rebbe, no one in this world is actually free. There's always something or someone getting in the way of our freedom. And therefore the Mishnah says it in the negative. Ein lecha ben chorin. There is no one who is free. That's the basic law of life in this world. Ella, but, however, Misha osik b'talmud Torah. If you are occupied, if you are involved in the study of Torah, then you lift yourself above the world, above the crowd, above the competitiveness and the politics and the pettiness and the nonsense. With Torah, you can transcend all of that nonsense and become a free person, but only with Torah. And that makes you free. And so the Mishnah says it very deliberately, very purposefully in the negative. Ein lecha ben chorin. The rule of life is there is no one who's free. Ella, but if you're Isaac, if you're occupied with Talmud Torah, then you're able to defy the rule of nature and go beyond the natural, to the supernatural, to the godly, to the infinite, to the divine, and you'll be able to transcend all of that. I have a dear friend who was a very successful businessman. And we have a weekly shir together. He's very busy, he travels the world, but whether he's in Johannesburg or Cape Town or London or Israel, he makes a point to call me and we have a 45-minute shir on WhatsApp video. We've been through Pirkei Avot, we've been through all kinds of things, and it's going for a nice number of years. And he once told me like this. He says this 45 minutes lifts him up. It takes his mind away from the rat race. And you know, in the rat race, even if you win the race, you're still a rat because you're caught up in the rat race. He says this 45 minutes gives him a serenity, a peace of mind like nothing else. He swims, he cycles, he does all kinds of things, diversions, if you will. But the Torah study gives him the biggest lift of all and gives him that sense of inner freedom. And that's why Torah is not restrictive. Torah is not limiting. Torah is, in fact, liberating. With all its laws and customs, rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, Torah actually gives us the power to liberate and free ourselves from convention, from routine, from the mores and the expectation of our neighbors, of society, of the media, and we're able to be independent, we're able to be free and do the right thing, do what we think is right. Our sages taught us, accept the truth from whence it comes. So I want to share with you an idea I heard from a non-Jewish source, in fact, a very unlikely source, but a very, very powerful message, which one of my favorites, and I quote it all the time, and I say it to, in shul, I've used it, and in my book, and I've shared it with brides and grooms. I think it's a powerful, profound lesson for life. I was in my car driving some years ago, and I heard a BBC interview on the radio. And the BBC interviewer is chatting to a gentleman named Malcolm Muggeridge. Now, those of you who have good memories or are old enough will recall he was a non-Jewish author, a journalist, for some time a politician. Excuse me. And for a number of years, he was the editor of Punch magazine. Now, in its heyday, Punch magazine was the most irreverent publication in all of England. They made a mockery of the royal family before they did it to themselves. But later in life, this cynical satirist, the editor of Punch magazine, Malcolm Muggeridge, became a Baal Tshuva. He wasn't Jewish, he didn't go to yeshiva. This former atheist became a devout believer. And this BBC interviewer is asking Malcolm Muggeridge, how can it be, Mr. Muggeridge? You, the Prince of Punch, the Sultan of Satire, the most irreverent person in all of the United Kingdom, you should suddenly submit to the rigors of religion? How is this possible? And Malcolm Muggeridge's answer on the BBC was a classic. He said, you know, I have a friend who's a famous yachtsman. He has his own yacht and he sails the high seas. And one day he invited me for a ride on his yacht. So I went on the yacht. And he takes out the little gadget and he shows to me. He says, you see this? You know what this is? Yeah, this is a compass. He says, there's a rule of the high seas. If you want to enjoy the freedom of the high seas, you must first become a slave to the compass. You must follow the compass religiously. Now, somebody, a novice with his first boat might say, well, I must follow this little gadget. This compass can tell me where to go. I'll go where I want to go. We all know he will go in circles. He'll go nowhere. He will flounder. But if you want to enjoy the freedom of the high seas, the exhilaration of the wind, sailing on your yacht, you have to first become a slave to the compass. Said Malcolm Muggeridge, faith is my navigational fix in life. And it keeps me moored, it keeps me free. Otherwise, there are storms out there. I would sink, I would go in circles. That navigational fix of faith keeps me free. But to be free, I have to become a slave to the compass. So for us, the Torah is our compass. The Torah is our navigational fix to guide us through life, through the storm waters of life, to keep us free and unfettered. Indeed, Ein lecha ben chorin, there is no one so free, Elamisha Isaac Talmud Torah, but he who is occupied with the study of Torah. A final story, and it's of another Pesach Seder, not in the Warsaw Ghetto, but in a Damascus prison. On Thursday, the 2nd of April, 1970, an Israeli Phantom jet was shot down over Damascus. The pilot, Pini Nachmani, was 26 years old. He was imprisoned in the Al-Maza prison in Damascus. And he wrote up the story. He writes that when Pesach came, they were there for a long time. When Pesach came, he and his two fellow Israeli prisoners of war in the Damascus prison tried to prepare to celebrate or to experience Pesach somehow in that Syrian jail. They scrubbed the floor. They painted a Seder plate on a piece of cardboard. By the grace of God, they managed to get a shipment from the chief rabbi of Zurich in Switzerland, a neutral country, sent them a few Haggadahs and matzah, precious matzah, came to them in the Syrian prison. And so they were able to celebrate a Seder there in the jail. And the youngest one, Boaz, was given the job of asking the Manishtana the 4 questions. And they ate the matzah. And they sang the songs that they remembered from their homes, from their youth. And they sang the Seder songs at the end of the Haggadah loud, so loud that the prison guards came and told them to hush. And they ignored the prison guards' instructions. They carried on singing with tremendous gusto and excitement. They felt free. Inside a prison in Damascus, Syria, those young Israeli airmen felt free. Eventually, they were freed in a prisoner swap. I think there was 1 Israeli for 45 Syrians or something like that. And Pini Nachmani would later write about that experience. And he would say that that Seder in a Damascus jail was the most inspiring, exhilarating Seder of his whole life, which he will never, ever forget. My friends, we are all in one kind of lockdown or another. Every country has its nuances. But we're all in one kind of imprisonment or another. And yet, as the Maharal insisted, we are all an innately free nation. You've seen, I'm sure, some of those videos coming out of Israel. Some guy standing in the street, singing Hallel, and hundreds or thousands of people on their balconies responding. Unbelievable. I haven't seen videos because it was Yom Tov, but they say that even Prime Minister Netanyahu encouraged Jews to go on their balconies and sing Manishtana together. Possibly millions of Jews throughout Israel sang the Manishtana together this year in such freedom as never before. Unbelievable. In our lockdown, in our prisons, we have expressed such freedom, unprecedented. And I'm sure many of you, in our own little, quiet, intimate seders, just the two of you, or maybe even the one of you on your own, alone, but not lonely, we made it special. My children are rabbis and rebbitzins in different communities. They always have these big public seders. They told me it was actually unique. It was just them and the children for a change. It was so special. It was absolutely meaningful and memorable. And so I hope it has been like that for all of you and for all of us and for all of Israel and for all of our people. So those people who went out on the balconies, or those of you who celebrated a proper Seder, even in your aloneness, were you in prison or were you inspired? Were you in lockdown or in liberty? I think it's clear. And I know that the vast majority of us not only made the best of it, but we made it the best. So wherever we are, whatever our circumstances, we are innately free. But the secret formula to developing that inner latent freedom inside our souls, inside our psyche, to bring it to the fore, is the Torah. When we are guided by Torah values, we are able to develop that innate freedom. My dear friends in Australia and wherever you may be watching around the world, I suspect there may be some South Africans as well in South Africa. Please God, may we all be inspired by Torah. And the Torah will make us free and keep us free. I wish you a good moed, moadim l'simcha, v'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuya. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Goldman. We really appreciate you giving up your time this afternoon. You should stay safe and stay well and have a Chag Sameach. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Our final share of this Chol Hamoed series will take place in about half an hour. We hope you can all join us then for Rabbi Yitzchak Adlerstein. To all of you, have a pleasant evening and a Chag Sameach. Thank you so much.